Are there any kind of practical safety considerations that you could add to what I just mentioned?
Well, I can tell you what I do. I use the internet every day.
Mm.
I do everything wired.
Absolutely.
I have no Wi-Fi in my house. I use a wired keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
I use a wired mouse.
Mm-hmm.
My printer is wired.
Yeah.
Doing things wired is much safer
mm-hmm.
than doing things wireless.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the first thing. Is that in fact the only thing that I use that's in a regular way that's wireless is my garage door opener, which is I don't use anything else. Now, so that it's a little bit less convenient to do it that way, but you actually get a better signal. You get much better security.
Sure.
And then by doing things wired, so the quality of what you're communicating is much better. So I think that we're really in it's like the whole world has gone nuts on this thing. And it's just crazy. And all of the science argues against doing what we are in fact doing. And why is the industry's been allowed to corrupt so many of the public agencies is sort of beyond belief. Not to mention politicians.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's I think it's a consequence of we've had it too good in this country for too long, and it's kind of the vomitorium stage of the republic. It's pretty sad. The ease and
the same kinds of things are going on in Europe and in East Asia and
sure.
places like Australia, and it's not it's not just a U.S. problem.
Sure.
It's hard to find. It's hard to find any country that's doing things the way it should be doing. Although, interestingly, probably the only major political figure anywhere in the world who seems to have at least a reasonable understanding of this, as far as I can determine, is Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
And that tells you a lot.
I heard one of our diplomats suffered a heart attack in the embassy during the 50s when there was electromagnetic bombardment of the embassy by the Russians.
Yeah, they did it for 22 years in Moscow in the Soviet age. Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me just say, we haven't talked about cardiac effects.
No. I was going to ask you about that because my father has had a Wi-Fi router under his bedroom for 10 years, but he's had AFib for 8 years. And what if the doctors had him on, but a calcium channel blocker?
Well, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that.
Please.
When people are exposed to EMFs from a wide variety of different kinds of sources, you get one thing you get is tachycardia, a very rapid heartbeat, and that can be produced instantaneously.
Oh.
Whereas longer term exposures cause bradycardia, which is slow heartbeat, and both of them can cause arrhythmias. So that's what you were talking about here, AFib.
Yeah.
And so arrhythmias, as you may know, are associated with sudden cardiac death.
Oh.
So we have an epidemic of young, apparently healthy athletes dying in the middle of an athletic competition of sudden cardiac death.
Wow.
In a few cases, it's been possible to save them, and when you do that, what you find is they have arrhythmias, and they have typically bradycardia. So they have the kinds of problems that we know are caused by longer exposures to the EMFs. And we're also getting, by the way, more and more examples of people dying or having other kinds of serious cardiac impacts in aircraft, because the Wi-Fi exposures are so high, at such high levels at some points in commercial airplanes. So that's becoming a major issue. Let me just say, I believe that all three of those things, and also a fourth, which has been less studied but is also occurring, and that's heart palpitations.
Yeah.
That all four of those are in fact caused by the impacts, the direct impacts of the EMFs on the pacemaker cells that occur in the sinoatrial node of the heart. Those are the cells that normally regulate the heartbeat. And it turns out they have a lot of these voltage-gated calcium channels in them that are important for their functioning.
Sure.
And so, you were talking about, was it your father?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, that's why they're using these calcium channel blockers in his case. But he needs to get rid of this Wi-Fi. And let me say, it's not just the Wi-Fi. People who live in apartments also can have very heavy exposures to Wi-Fi of people living, nearby.
Right.
And so what the consequences of that is, well, there's two things really. One is you have to worry about where you're going to sleep.
Yeah.
And the second thing is that you need to put shielding in to protect yourself from things that are coming in from other apartments. And of course, similarly, you may need shielding on your outer walls and on your your windows and so forth of where you're living as well. It is possible to shield, to put shielding in.
Yeah.
It's at least somewhat inconvenient, I guess I have to say, but and you can even put shielding in your floors and in your ceiling. So,
do you know if any of the paint works? Whether metal fiber or graphite or whatever they're using.
I think graphite can work quite well. I'm not familiar with metal fiber in paint. I know there is metal fiber that is sold in clothing that can help shield your body.
Okay.
But I don't know what's available in paint. So maybe you can tell me. But yeah. But yeah, the graphite paint is black, and so you want to use graphite paint. Of course, you usually paint it over it with something else, or put it under wallpaper or something, so you're not looking at black. But
yeah,
it still works even when it's covered up. So that's not a problem.
Absolutely. And the smart meters pulse on occasion. They can be biologically active if you're within the proximity of one of these smart utility meters.
Yeah, and they pulse thousands of times a day. They put out pulses.
They're really irregular. I've studied them in Metro Detroit as well as in Knoxville, Tennessee, and they're really irregular. Sometimes it'll be nothing for 2 minutes, and then it'll sometimes be 4 or 5 peaks. I guess it's milliwave per square meter, I think is what my meter reads at, and it'll peak it. If I'm 5 feet from it, it'll still get close to 20 milliwave per square meter.
Yeah, I think I don't know why they're doing this. I mean, in principle, they only need to pulse either once a month if all you're doing is reading your thing, or maybe a couple of times, 2 or 3 or 4 times a day if you're trying to lower the rates, for instance, at night when there's less demand. If you're trying to encourage people to use electricity during that time, so they'll have lower rates.
Sure.
But I don't think we're even doing that. So, there've been a lot of people who've been saying, well, they're spying on us, and I don't know that that's the case, but it's hard to find any reason why they'd be doing what they're doing if that were not the case. So, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. With regard to grids, I've heard it argued for grid stability in the case of they're getting feedback. In the case, for instance, in the summer when everybody runs their air conditioner, they can get a real-time gauge for usage and whether or not they can conceivably restrict usage, remotely. In the case of a brownout scenario where they can, rather than having critical errors or failure in the system. That's just the kind of.
That might make sense when you're having a critical situation. But what about the other 99% of the time when you're not?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this stuff? Anyway, it's I don't know. It's we live in a crazy world. Yeah.
That's true. Well, sir, I really appreciate your time. I could go on picking your brain for hours here, but I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of all the electro-hypersensitive people out there and just people that are trying to be responsible parents and preventative with their health. So we salute you for all your efforts and the continued support and help with awareness on this stuff. So.
Okay.
We thank you for your time, sir.
You're welcome.
God bless. Goodbye.